Are about 7 minutes late. My apologies. We are here again on day 5 of our budget work session. It is June 3rd, 2025, and we will start. Well, let me give a little personal privilege here. I know he's not watching, but today is my son's 18th birthday, Nicholas. And since this is recorded, I can show him later that I did shout him out. So Nicholas, happy birthday. Congratulations. He's about to graduate from Riverside High School.
Yay.
And really excited for him. So happy birthday, Nicholas.
And I have to say congratulations to you, Dad. That's an accomplishment for you as well, and your wife.
And Erin, my wife. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so we have one item on the agenda, and that's board discussion today. Continuation from yesterday. And so I'll turn it over to Manager Hager.
All right, good morning, board. We left yesterday close to finishing up budget conversations. At the end of the meeting, we walked through the add delete list, and we also talked about the need of discussing our budget ordinance with a slight modification to that as well. And so as far as your preference, we can recap where we are with the add delete list and then walk through the ordinance component. And so we'll pull that up. And the board asked us to look and revisit where we were, and then come back today to see, based on those discussions, if there were ways to close the gaps based on where we were yesterday without it being a tax increase. So our first walk through that exercise, and then we can talk to see if there are additional conversations beyond that, which I do believe there may be. So Keith, I'll let you walk through that. Yes, ma'am.
It's not showing up on our
It's not?
screen. No.
Okay, it's showing up on mine.
Maybe I need to move to another. Okay.
It's not, okay, let me see. Okay. Thank you.
Well, while Monica fixes that, I'll go over what the add delete list is for a third time, just to make sure everyone gets it in your head clearly. This is, we're tracking changes between the manager's recommended budget and ultimately, and hopefully what you will approve on July the 9th, but we're hoping to finish today changes between the manager's recommended budget and the commissioner approved budget. The highlighted top section in blue are sort of, they're not mandatory, but they're sort of administrative updated numbers. Remember I told you yesterday, sometimes we miss an expenditure and we need to add it in that should be built in. Sometimes we miss a revenue or a new revenue comes in that we need to put in. That's what happened with the top blue. There's $126,000 more we need to give pre-K to hold them harmless to what we were planning on doing. And there's a $300,000 revenue that that popped up on our screen between the manager's recommended and today. So those are administrative changes that it nets out to a positive to the county, savings, whatever you want to call it, of $100,000+. That has to be done. It's not really arguable, just letting you know. The purple area of the table you're looking at is where the manager just set up where discussions have been had between the board members about additional funding, and the majority of additional funding, or the only additional funding that the board has talked about so far, is an additional $2.57 million for DPS, on top of the $10.35 million that the manager recommended. How would we pay for that $2.57 million? That's the list you're going to see in red, and the revenues. One way we're doing it is we're reducing expenditures for DPS in current capital. They had been recommended for $6 million. We are recommending $5 million, or the manager is proposing in the add delete list, giving them $5 million instead of $6 million. That frees up $1 million to help offset the $2.57 million. But we still got $1 million plus to go, $1.5 million to go to get back in balance. How are we going to find the rest of that $1.5 million? Well, there was discussion yesterday and from the board members after a presentation from Hayti Reborn that Hayti said they needed $500,000 for operational spending and $1 million for additional expansion of programs or new programs. The county budget recommended $1 million. You could take $500,000 of that recommended $1 million, still meet Haty's $500,000 operational needs as they presented yesterday, and take the other $500,000 and begin to offset the cost for DPS. Everyone following me here on this? All right, so that's 1.5 million of the 2.5 million that we're trying to find money for. Another way we could do it, and the manager was nice enough to come down and have a powwow with the budget office yesterday afternoon after these meetings. We sat around and racked our brains trying to find ways to save dollars so we don't have to potentially increase the property tax rate. One couple of small areas that we could find funding, there's manager's contingency. We always every year budget a couple of $100,000 in the manager's office for unknown, unplanned needs. It gives her a little bit of freedom, or the manager's office a little bit of freedom to enter into contracts real quickly or do things like that. She's willing, with tightening of the belt, to decrease that amount by $100,000. That will leave the manager's contingency down to $100,000. I saw your email, Claudia. It's a little bit different, but it's $100,000. That leaves her manager's contingency budget at $100,000, but it's down from $200,000. So that's saving $100,000 in expenditures.
Now, I want to give an example. If you may recall, about two meetings ago, we approved the communications plan. It was a joint plan that was approved by the board for about $100,000. So versus appropriating fund balance, we used the dollars that was in the manager's contingency. The next one will be very similar. You know, when you start talking about moving money from your boss's line, that's kind of a slippery slope. So, but I did, in the spirit of the spending patterns for the Board of Commissioners contingency amount, looked at reducing that by $50,000. Keith, I thought I would say that versus you. And so based on the spending, it had not been used at the fullest amount. And so this would also be a small adjustment as well. And Keith, you can explain. Yes.
I also just had a question. The idea of taking $1 million away from the DPS's ongoing capital, are there any concerns about that?
No, it's not, because we gave them authority for $10 million through our pay-go funds or the use of LOBs. Typically, those funds are used for, one-time capital projects. So they have a larger funding stream available to them based on what we saw, we've seen and heard in recent months about HVAC issues, other school climate issues. So that's why I sort of preemptively put that in the budget based on what we were hearing and knowing what we've done in the past. You were here during that period when we put a placeholder of $10 million in the budget, and it allowed them for planning for future bonds, but also to address most pressing repair renovations. And so from our perspective, this does not reduce their ability to complete work. It also optimizes other dollars they already have from ARPA funds that we presented to them last year. They're still spending that down, as well as access to their lottery fund. So we don't see this presenting a major issue, but we can work throughout the year if something arises, but we don't anticipate anything arising above what we've put in the pay-go/LOBs category. So they are covered, and that intent was for multiple years, but if they need it all in 1 year, then that is available. But our intent is to make sure that those areas that are climate-related, roof, et cetera, that is the last dollar they use, but that's another cushion for them. So we feel very comfortable with this strategy.
Okay. I just want to be clear about that because other people might see that and be concerned.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
So we
so I
went
just
above,
want-
yes,
yeah,
ma'am. And
okay.
and we've not, I don't think that's got picked up as much, so I'm glad you brought it up, that we went above what was asked when it related to capital, because our understanding of where they are and how we've handled those things in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I figured, that because we're giving the 10 million and, you know, an extra that could offset what they got in the in their recurring capital, that 6 million. So, yes.
And we would work over the next few years to restore it to the 6 million, so it's a part of their base. But if the intent is not to raise taxes above what's recommended, which I truly support, we felt this was a way, a win-win for them to have access to additional dollars in their current expense budget, but still achieve those capital-related coverage.
Yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate the efforts to not raise taxes. I just came from the Housing for New Hope breakfast, and a lot of conversation about just the interplay about federal funding, not only for us at the local level, but also at the state level. Senator Murdoch and Representative Alston were on a panel, and you know, I think they said 50% of the funding, I don't want to get that quite right, but the amount of money that comes into the state budget, that is federal funding as well. And so I think making sure that we are putting ourselves in a position that we're able to respond to what may come, and give us some flexibility and resiliency to meet the needs that may arise over the next year. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Michelle?
Yeah, I have a question, and this was brought to my attention about Alliance Health, and there's money allocated to them for DPS, and that money's not being used. I believe it's a little over $1 million, and I want to know, why can't we take that money, since they're not using it? Yeah, so if you can clarify that, yeah.
Sure, that's a great question. We, Alliance, in looking at their budget, their expenditures, their budget is close to $6.4 million. I may have it off a little bit. Their projected expenditure use for this current year is close to $2 million. It's about $4 million difference. Part of the reason it's lower is because of the dollars made available through Medicaid expansion. So they do the best practice. They use other dollars first, and so they did not have to use local dollars. It's a two-part issue with their budget. Well, with their budget, we reduce their budget based on historical patterns to $4.5 million, okay? And so, but we recognize there are some key areas that still need to be supported. We are allowing them to carry forward the dollars that are not spent in the current year into next year's budget. And some of those strategies were to support Durham Public Schools. So we will, in fact, support Durham Public Schools through the Alliance budget. The question is, because that is a one-time adjustment is what happens in outlying years. And so I know that's a concern of theirs. We want to see what the patterns are so that we can come up with a longer term solution. But some of those dollars will support Durham Public Schools, and some are other community partner areas that have high need. So thank you.
Manager?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Manager, just to piggyback off of Commissioner Burton's comments, it's also come to my attention that with respect to the services that Alliance will provide for DPS, they haven't actually even engaged in a memorandum of agreement just yet with regards to what those services will look like, which is a concern for me at this particular moment.
Yes, sir. There were some delays in the agreement being finalized, and so the intent last year was for the services to occur for the current fiscal year 24-25. The great news is that the agreement is close to being finalized, and we'll give the board an update on that status. The services, as I do understand, are scheduled to happen early next fiscal year. So we are further along, and the great part of all of it as well, there are some best case examples that they're following. Wake County does this effort with the Alliance, and so it's not like they're starting from scratch. So we do feel like once they finalize the agreements, which are very close, we will see that work coming together.
So is the takeaway here today that the MOU is forthcoming?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
All
and
right.
we will give you an update. Alliance is coordinating some responses to questions for us.
Okay. And also, Chair Alum is online, and she has her hand up. So, Nita, would you like to chime in here?
Yeah. Good morning. Can y'all hear me?
Yep,
Good
we sure
morning.
can.
Wonderful. Yeah, I just want to echo the sentiments. Thank you so much to the budget
I'm
team.
sorry,
and
can you speak up, Chair Lum?
Yo, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Manager Hager and the budget team for, working with us to be creative and minimize the tax impact on our residents. I really appreciate that. I feel really comfortable with what's on this spreadsheet and moving forward with it as such. I did have one additional thing though, wondering, because I was talking with the city council, and I know that there's been conversations and like this has been ongoing about, an additional role to support the work of NIO that would be split between the city and county. And I know Councilmember Caballero is having conversations on the city side and talking to Manager Bo about it there. And I was wondering, because we don't have it in our proposed budget as it is right now, right?
So for that effort, what I was going to propose is that we realign an existing position to support outreach. And so we can formally do that, but have my commitment, because additional alignments and realignments will be happening because we are looking at all program areas and workloads. So that is the intent for that work to happen.
Right. So the money is there then in this budget for that.
We will realign,
Well,
yes, ma'am. We will
Okay,
realign it's not on our list as an adjustment, but yes, ma'am, we do. We have approximately 370 vacancies, and the intent is to address that additional workload through a realignment of a position.
Thank you, Manager Hager.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
Commissioner
I'm
Burton.
sorry, I don't know what Chair Lam is talking about. What position is this, and can you be more clear about what this is?
This is related to some community outreach that's happening in cooperative extension, and we have some workload issues, and so this is one that we would address through realignments of an existing position. Yes, ma'am. And I will say that right now we're just at a tricky time. There are several programmatic areas that are on the radar for potential reductions from federal dollars. So over the next few weeks and months, we will look at workload and see where we may need to bolster that support. Thank you.
Chair Lum, did you have any other questions or comments? Did other commissioners? Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention about the alliance discussion. That's why I had asked for them to be a part of the budget work sessions, which I know we couldn't do, but I do look forward to them coming. And I just wanted to give a little background to my colleagues because this came up last year. So this funding from Alliance is a program that they're doing in Wake County where kids who are identified who have severe behavioral health needs and who really need assistance with getting resources and getting connected to care outside of what may be normally available and supporting their families. That's what this program is about. So I do think it's needed. We especially see this with DSS. We see increasing numbers of families that have children with severe behavioral health issues, and so this would be an example of, I think, an upstream support to help with some of the challenges that families are facing. So looking forward to that getting going. I just want to share a little background about that program. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Any comments here? Well, so I'll just go on record and saying I don't agree with the reduction of $500,000 from Hayti Reborn. I'm one commissioner. I get that. So that's just my position here. I want us to think about.
Vice Chair,
Yes.
just for the record, I'm not opposed to the 1 million staying in, but I was willing to compromise in order to get us across the finish line if that were necessary. But I fully support the
Point taken. I wasn't supportive of the 1 million staying in. You know, it was the 500,000 that we're talking about here.
I guess what I meant just is the additional 500,000.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah. The additional 500,000 is. You know, it's said that if you look at an organization's budget, you know what their priorities are. And I want to make sure that my time on this board is cloaked in support for whatever we can do for the people who most need it. I understand that there were some challenges around how the organization was started and some of the things moving forward, and how we get them independent and independent of the county's contributions. But so yesterday, there was a comment made saying, well, we have a staff that does similar things. And I find that really interesting because there's a lot of organizations that we support where we have staff that do similar things. We have a workforce and development committee here, but we support programs like Made in Durham that do the same thing. I also find it kind of difficult to say if the work is enough or not, while also saying we can't fund for more, right? But then we praise them in public about what they're able to do, their graduations. We attend their graduations. We say this is great. But then when we come to decide how we increase those types of services, we have challenges with that. This is not a hill that I will die on. There's other priorities. There's other things. But even, let's look at the DPS line item here. Everyone here knows I'm a huge supporter of DPS. But even yesterday, when it was showed that it's 2.5 million, they were concerned. There was concern because we had to add the charter piece. But it was like, okay, well, where can we cut to make that happen? Instead of saying, well, we wanted $2 million, let's reduce it to get to $2 million, and whatever comes out of that, whatever the charter piece is. When I had conversations, because I couldn't make it to the meeting, it was transportation and EC. Those are the two things. Commissioner Burton, Commissioner Jacobs, those are the two things we want to add for DPS. But I see master's pay, supplement, I guess increase, transportation, and EC now, which is now $2.5 million. That's a challenge for me, because I came in saying, "Oh, I'll be happy to do the $2 million for $2 million additional for DPS than the manager's budget." But now we're at $2,574,000, and the thing to do that is to take away another program that actually handles challenges on the other end of what DPS does for adults that are going through situations, and we want to get them back into the education system, whatever it may be. So we cut that $500,000 essentially to make up that $500,000 difference here. I'm troubled by that. I want to go on record saying I'm troubled by that, and I don't feel that what we want to accomplish as a county and as a board, from our conversations, I don't think we head in that direction when we cut programs like that. We've already lost Bull City United. Whatever problems they had, I get it. I was not a big supporter on the campaign trail. I said, we need to relook at that. We need to look at goals and metrics. But it's really hard to not have opinion. It's really hard to not let opinions rule a budget when there aren't measures to see if the programs that we're funding are actually benefiting in the direction that we want. And that's what it feels like in some of these smaller conversations is happening, is we're allowing opinions and feelings about history or whatever it is to happen to make decisions on the budget, and I just don't necessarily agree with that. That's not how I govern, and that's why I ask the questions that I do. So I just wanted to go on the record to state that I disagree with I never agreed with the $1.5 million for Hayti Reborn, JM, HRJM. But I supported the county manager's budget for $1 million for them. And I still support that. I know I'm in the minority here, and I will leave it at that. But as we exit this budget cycle, and I look into the future for the next three, at least three that I'll be a part of, I need you all to know, I need you all in the community to know that I work really hard not to let my feelings or opinion or like just thoughts govern the way I budget. I want figures, I want numbers. And this year for me is about collecting up front what those numbers should be, and next year so it can inform me of how we should go. What is success? What is failure? What needs improvement? That's what this year is for. So I was not interested in taking away funding for anyone, because I hadn't seen any previous questions about goals or success or what that may be. Let me give you an example. With Hayti Reborn Justice Movement, I was talking to Commissioner Burton yesterday, and she knows I always love our conversations because we talk for so long every day, almost every day. And I was saying a measurement that I would be interested in doing for HRJM is if we were to fund the $1 million, one of the criteria would be, there would have to be a development officer kind of built into this, and they would be responsible by the time they come back for the budget next year to raise $250,000. That means they've built an apparatus to raise money and become self-sustaining. So instead of us just ripping money away, we're saying, look, we want you to be successful. We want you to develop, to get off of the need for the county money each year, but you need to start developing this apparatus to fundraise. We're going to help you this year. We're going to give you this money to help you do that. You have new board members who are, by all accounts, excellent in this sort of thing. And so, all right, were you able to create an apparatus to raise $250,000 next year? Because we can't fund you if you don't do that. Those are the types of things we need if we want the programs that we support to succeed, instead of ripping money away and saying, too bad. So, again, I know I'm in the minority of this. I don't want to raise taxes. I get that. But, I don't. But I just needed to go on record saying that I disagree with taking from a program like this and taking from a program like this in general, wherever the money ends up going. I just disagree with that. Okay, so that's what I needed to say. Nita, did you
Hi,
have your
yes.
Yeah, okay, there you are.
Yep. Thank you, Vice Chair Dr. Lee. I just wanted to respond to your comments. I appreciate your comments, and also recognizing that, I personally, I know it may not be your intention from this, but, find offense to dismissing, criticisms that someone may have as feelings about a program rather than, evaluative thought process of coming to a decision that of providing 500,000 rather than the 1 million. So I just wanted to point that out, that I don't think it's a fair assessment to just play it out to be feelings about a program rather than an evaluative thought, a thoughtful evaluation of a program. And also recognizing that, again, in their presentation yesterday, they asked for 500,000. And like, I know Manager Hager put 1 million as her recommended. They asked for 500. So 500 was extra that was going to them. So it is not going to cut their programming. They are going to continue to be able to provide the services with what is being recommended in this spreadsheet right here. So there is not a cut to the services that they are going to provide. And I think it's also important to note that, none of us wanted to cut services and programmings on in any sphere, really, this budget cycle, but it has been a budget cycle where we have made cuts, where Manager Hager asked every single department and office that receives funding from the county to come, and when they submit their budget requests, to have a cut in their budget. And that's why every department did make cuts. And even though we don't necessarily see it on this spreadsheet because it was already taken into consideration in the manager's budget, that doesn't mean those cuts haven't been made. And we all are, we all have to carry that, and it's difficult. But it's not something that any of us, I would say, have done based on feelings. It's because we have to be stewards of these tax dollars that the residents of Durham have entrusted us with. And for me, coming to this decision about the 500,000 is with that great responsibility that I carry on my shoulder, that each of us carries on our shoulders, that there is a program, that the bridge program that they have the graduates from is really meaningful work, and also assessing the holistic space of where we're in at this budget cycle and what we have capacity to fund. And again, just reiterating, it is not feelings and it is not a cut to their programming.
Well, I'd really love to see that evaluation that you all did, because I haven't seen one yet. All right. Commissioner Burton?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, and I appreciate, what you're saying, Dr. Lee. In that conversation that we had yesterday, I think this is a bigger conversation as to how we evaluate nonprofits, right? This 6 months on the job for me, for 3 of us, and understanding there are a lot of nonprofits here in Durham County, and they're all wanting resources, right? Listening to the 2 leaders of Hayti Reborn Justice Movement, I really got their vision of what they're trying to do, and what they're really are trying to accomplish. But I also understand that it takes, how much can we keep funding nonprofits, right? And I think that having this discussion, I think the work that they're are trying to do is important, trying to help individuals get back into the mainstream of life. It's touching human beings, what I did as an educator. I think this is a bigger discussion with the city, like how do we work collaboratively together to help people to rebuild their lives, right? And how do we help nonprofits secure the funding that they need to do really, really important work? Because it's been kind of challenging for me as a new commissioner trying to figure out, okay, where do nonprofits get support and funding if they're doing good work? So I just wanted to put that out there, and I think it's important for us as commissioners moving forward that we have very strong metrics of how we evaluate programs, and really communicating that to our county manager so she can therefore communicate it to staff. So when these issues come up, we'll have a really true blueprint as to how we want to go forward. So I want to say thank you, Dr. Lee, for your comments.
Okay. Anyone? Wendy?
Yeah, I just want to say I respect everything that everybody has said. This is a very difficult budget and a very difficult time. As I started out this morning thinking about our state budget as well. And, to Commissioner Lom's point, when we get the budget recommended from the county manager, we had $60 million worth of requests this year. So we don't see all of the hard choices that our staff have already had to make when they've come forward to us. The fact that we are trying to give increased funding to Durham Public Schools is because we have always prioritized investing in education and investing in our children in Durham County. That has always been our priority, and so that's why we're trying really hard to do what we can. And I think that so we really have not been looking at expansion in any area except for public safety, where things like we've seen the numbers with the EMS response have been scary. And then, on the other side, we have people on fixed incomes who we cannot forget when we think about budget increases. So I really appreciate the staff looking at that. I think Commissioner Burton hit the nail on the head when she said that we're with this coming year, with the ARPA funding cliff, we're going to have to come up with a way to move forward. When I first came on the board, we didn't have a process. We had about 70 nonprofits that we were funding $1 million, and they were very, very small amounts, like $10,000. And we realized that was not effective. We also realized it was a political decision-making where commissioners were just putting forward different nonprofits. And then we moved into, before COVID, a process where the staff did come up with a really good decision-making rubric. We tied the nonprofit funding to our strategic plan, to county departments, and I really think that we came up with a good process. I think what we need to build into it is the kind of things that Vice Chair Dr. Lee talked about, which is what are the metrics, and how do we really also support the nonprofits to getting there. I think one of the recent models we have in our community now is around collaboration, trying to get nonprofits to also work together, and recognizing the collective impact of that. But, so everybody's brought up really, really good points as we move forward, because we have very limited resources and tremendous needs, and I think that will really help us. And I want to lift up what Commissioner Chair Lom said. I don't make decisions based on feelings. I mean, I probably drive people nuts because I ask for so much information. I want to recognize that I can go overboard on that. So I'm try to be very deliberate and ask for a lot of information and how I make decisions. And just mentioning the city, I think understanding what is everyone doing, because the city has a program called Welcome Home. And their program is around reentry and connecting justice-involved residents to housing and jobs and transportation and resources. And we do our reentry council. So I think understanding what our whole ecosystem is, because we probably don't even totally have a grasp on that. And then lastly, I want to address, I think that is confusing, and with the way it's listed in the notes where it says master's, supplement, et cetera. So I want to acknowledge that, Vice Chair Dr. Lee. I think that what we talked about last week is that we were hoping that the master's pay and the supplement pay could be covered in what the county manager had already recommended, which was an additional $4 million, and that we were talking about that the $4 million should probably be able to cover that. and that an extra 2 million would cover the bus drivers and the EC staff. So I just want to clarify that. And also, we can talk about this later, but how do we include in our budget ordinance language saying that our intent is for the funding the county is providing outside of the continuation budget is for, our intent is for this to fund, supplement master's pay, EC and bus transportation staff. So we could talk about that, knowing that they, of course, can do whatever they want.
I would like to make one comment. I almost wanted to, in the notes section, take off what those categories were from the standpoint to get in the practice of not directing, because the board can't. And so they're also facing some unknowns, and we know that once the dollars get there, they can shift them as they see highest priority. One other point I'd like to bring up, and ACMP or South, have you and possibly Crystal share. The city and the county has been working for the past several years to look at what can we do in intervention services, the efforts that at one point we collaborated on with Bull City United, then pivoted. We collaborate with Project Build. There are efforts in the city and some other spaces, and there's a very new approach that we're trying to do to make sure, from the HEART initiative to existing county initiatives, there's that synergy and planning that's coordinated not only with the city, county, but with our community partners. And Joanne, do you mind just talking for a couple of minutes about what will be coming to the board within the fall as an update?
Good morning, Joanne Pierce, Assistant County Manager, and I see the director who actually is working very closely with our Justice Services Department Director, the Community Safety Director with the City of Durham, and also, of course, with our city and county managers. And if I may, Manager Hager, if I may call Crystal Harris up to talk about that collaboration that will include our mapping of what services do we have, what programs and services and interventions do we have in our county. We did this type of mapping for within the Justice Services Department, and it really revealed a lot of where our gaps were. We kind of thought we had gaps, but mapping it out and coming up with a strategy to fill the gaps that we know exist really will have an impact on our effectiveness. But I will turn it over to Crystal Harris, because she is part of this collaborative that really is quite hopeful and has been proven in other areas. Crystal Harris.
Good morning, and I'll be brief. So Rashana Parker, who's the Justice Services Director, and myself and Ryan Smith have been working for the last couple of months, and we actually visited the Vera Institute in New York, Vera Institute of Justice in New York, and we will be working with them in collaboration with the city. They're going to come and basically provide technical assistance to us to help us identify what resources we do have. We are actually planning to meet on Friday as the three of us to look at what are the committees, the task force, what are the groups, what are the nonprofits that are all doing work, but they're doing work in silos, so that we can kind of provide like a comprehensive safety plan for the county and the city of Durham. And so that is to kind of help identify where some of the gaps in services, but we think it's a gap, but there is somebody else in the community that may be doing this work, who in the county is doing the work. The Welcome Home program is a part of how Ryan and Rashana started working together, and then I had my own work with Ryan, so we just decided to collaborate together and partner together. We're going to also be working with the University of Maryland to come and do kind of like an executive 5-day intensive training, and that will also be including those nonprofits, those community organizations, as well as county and city leadership, because it takes everybody to do this work. So we're going to work with them as well, kind of in concert together, to help build that ecosystem, so people will know this is who's doing this work, this is where I can go, and they don't have to keep going to every different place asking the same questions. We'll be able to develop this one resource of where people can find the help that they're needing for as an adult or for a youth. So that's what we're working together on. We're actually meeting every 2 weeks. And so we do work kind of individually, and then we come back together as a collective. So we are planning to have that work session together on Friday to be able to start mapping out what we have going on in the county of Durham.
Thank you so very much. And the intent is to figure out where the gaps are, who are the partners, and from a accountability perspective, who's doing it best, so we can fill in those gaps. Just wanted to share that so that you will have some additional context.
Valentine, did you have something?
Yes, Vice Chair,
right.
thank you. So let me just say that I appreciate the nature in which you have centered our processes during this collaborative period around the budget. And it's clear to me that this time next year, things will be a lot different with regards to our decision-making and those measures that will guide our decisions. But this conversation, both personal ones with the other commissioners and collectively here on the dais, have been healthy. And it harkens back to a conversation on yesterday when we talked about being uncomfortable. And in that space of being uncomfortable is where change occurs. And I feel that here today. And I think that to point out something Commissioner Lam said with regards to our responsibilities, regards to being good stewards. I think we haven't said it to one another, but I think we all aim to be good stewards. And this uncomfortable tension around the budget and how we arrive at decisions is one that I think is healthy for all of us here on the dais. So we are in an environment where there are limited resources, and tough decisions sometimes have to be made. And that's sort of the space that we're in. But another thing that I think is important, and pointing back to you, Dr. Lee, with regards to pushing us on what we say we value. And budgets are value documents. And so I think that we're experiencing some of that here this year. And so thank you for that. This tension was needed, particularly as we grow together as a new board. Thank you.
Okay. Just wanted to check in with Chair Lum, if you had any other. Okay, she just messaged me. She said she doesn't. Okay, so was there any other part of this?
Yep.
All right, I'm sorry, there's one last.
Yeah, I was going to wrap up the net difference. So
Okay.
we had gotten through manager's contingency being dropped by $100,000, commissioner contingency being dropped by $50,000. That goes from $100,000 to $50,000. It's the exact same sort of. It's usually money budgeted in the commissioner's accounts that you use for some of the same things, unplanned expenses. Still have $50,000. It's a little bit of skin in the game by reducing that from $100,000 down to $50,000. We still were out of balance. How are we going to find it? Well, the budget office and the manager scoured some of our revenue sources, and we're going to bump up our interest income. This is money we earn on our cash in the bank. We were conservative in that revenue estimate when we initially did it, so we're bumping it up $300,000. We're talking about a $7 million revenue source, so $300,000 is not a huge increase on that number. So we're bumping up that revenue by $300,000. We're still $400,000 out. How are we going to find that $400,000? We're going to appropriate a little bit more of our fund balance, $425,000. And that, the totality of those things gets us into balance, paying for the $2.57 million, largely for schools, without a tax rate increase. So to sum it up, a couple of revenue increases, a number of expenditure decreases, some of which you have discussed, some of which I just relayed to you and the manager relayed to you. All that does, these changes, if accepted by the board with approval of the budget ordinance on June the 9th, will mean that the tax rate will stay at the manager's recommended 3.5-cent increase, and schools will get an additional $2.57 million on top of the 10.3.
So just quick question, will taking the money out of our fund balance, will that give us a negative, like?
No, that's a great question.
Yeah.
The amount, our intent is never to use fund balance, okay? That's number one. And there are a couple of places that we can soften the impact of the use. One, yesterday we talked about the potential of looking at leasing some of the cars versus buying all of them. And so that is one place, but one I didn't feel comfortable putting on the list and saying, because we haven't done our due diligence on that. As managers and as department heads, we can always control how spending happens. So it's either on one side, you're spending either through controlling vacancies or controlling other types of operating expenses, priorities in areas that may, spending in areas that may not be as of high priority. So this year will be like none other. And I think I've shared it with board members that every budget allocation will be given with an asterisk, that entities will need to be prepared for shifts based on unknowns in our federal and state budget revenue stream, as well as the economy. There are just lots of unknowns in ways we've just not seen, but we will get through. And so, I do appreciate you asking the question, because we've talked about our fund balance and where we need to be. And as a matter of fact, we will have more conversations of how do we continue to stay in the healthy position that we're in some upcoming meetings. So I do appreciate you asking the question, but it is one that we do feel comfortable. As I mentioned earlier, we have about 370 vacancies, and so that does give some comfort as well with that slight uptick.
Well, to Keith and David and your budget team, thank you. Thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. Last little bit of education. These numbers, in effect, are make-believe. We are projecting revenues that we haven't collected and will not know how much we've collected until June of next year. So saying thank you, this is the relatively easy part. Let's see where the year ends up. And this is where Claudia talks. So we do a lot of hard work in trying to project out. So
yes.
Thank you maybe a little bit early. It made the math work.
We received the thank you.
Well, I thank you for all your hard work. Thank you, Manager Hager. I must celebrate our first budget as a county commission. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I also want to say thank you. And I mean, this is what governing is all about. I think to me this represents the best in government, is when you have the staff and elected officials working together to problem solve and come up with solutions. And I think this shows a lot of creativity and due diligence and making hard decisions, as Commissioner Valentine said. But we can't do this work without our staff. And this is exactly a case in point. So I appreciate you all, appreciate you, County Manager. I think that we've tried to balance a lot of different things, and I am proud of where we ended up.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I guess I join my colleagues in saying thank you to the budget staff for the long hours that they put into this effort. Hope we can get this thing across the finish line. Thank you for your leadership, County Manager. And to my colleagues, the work continues. And it's clear that, that we're marking the way forward. And so I hope to be a constructive part of that effort.
I wanted to check in to see if Chair Lum, before we get into this part here, if she wanted to make comments as well. Okay, she says she'll save her comments for Monday.
Okay,
All
fantastic.
right, and so also as well, thank you all very much. This is hard work, listening to us and going back and forth and throwing in numbers here, taking out numbers there, and all that to make it all work with no tax increase. That is just exceptional. So to you, the staff, the budget office, county manager, thank you all.
Okay.
This is great. Yeah, Wendy.
I did have one question related to the language in the budget ordinance, because now Keith and the budget staff are going to go and write up the ordinance, right?
Right.
Does the board want to include any language about intent? The manager's shaking her head.
We have a version for you to consider.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
The next thing
Okay.
we're gonna go over is the
Yes.
Okay.
budget.
That's
All
a
right.
great segue into our
Okay.
next
All right.
topic.
Just to let you know that the manager and I have been at this a long time. I think this is our 24th. It's my 24th or 25th budget. I was hired by Claudia when we were both youngsters in 2000, the year 2000, as a senior budget analyst for Durham. So I think I'm on my 25th one. I don't know how many more we have in us, but
I don't know. They are quite exciting. It should be 2 pages that I passed out to you. And Keith, I don't know if you have a copy of
we
this,
do.
but you have it on the screen.
David has it up on the screen.
All right, great. And so, and Keith and his sort of reminiscing of when we started as working together years ago, there are some components of this ordinance that have not changed since then. And so we will highlight the areas that we're going to recommend some minor tweaks. There is one that we will come back to you in August to talk a little bit, or July, to talk about further. And but we can start at the top, David, to talk through the ordinance, just so that they get a sense of all the nuances. And Keith, did you want to walk through that, or I can?
Yeah, we can. Well, just so everyone knows, the budget document is basically just an extended conversation of this document. This 8-page document is the legal ordinance that the Board of County Commissioners sets. The budget document is just filler information explaining details of the budget ordinance. So this is the thing you're approving. We can go through it. It's a couple of whereas statements. It tells you when you're approving it. It tells that you went through some state mandated by state law steps. You had the manager has to, by a certain date, produce the recommended budget. Then the county has to have a public hearing. And then there's a date that you approve the budget, which is June the 9th. And then you have to set the tax rate in this document, David, the next page you're looking at here sort of shows how we budget. And these tables, while they're simple, sort of establish a pattern of when you are notified that you need to approve budget amendments. If you see this page, each one of those columns where it says general fund, swap fund, capital, those are individual funds that you're approving as a part, budget you're approving as a part of this budget ordinance. The key is that you look at the function. It says general government, public safety, transportation, and so on. Look at the biggest budget by far is the general fund budget. This is last year's budget, even though it says 25, 26. We haven't updated these tables yet because you haven't decided until today what the numbers were going to stop being. But to give you an example, the general fund budget is $652 million, but it's split up between these functions. Why is it put in functions? This is where the board has made a decision, and it's been 20 plus years, where you said you wanted to be notified through a budget amendment when money moves from public safety function to general government. What does that mean? If there's sheriff dollars that are unspent that are needed in the county manager's office, for us to move that money means we would have to move it from the public safety function to the general government function, and you all would need to approve that move. If, however, the manager wants to move money within her own budget, you all don't need to be approved. If, however, she wants to move money between the county manager's budget, which is in general government, and the budget office, there's a certain amount she can move without letting you know, and there's a maximum amount, which you all, I'm not going to go into detail, but that's why this is set up that way, if that makes sense. Because you all have said at what level you want to be notified and discuss. Smaller jurisdictions do it down at the line item level. Literally every budget transfer in a department goes to the board and they approve it. Other places may only do it at the fund level and say, you got it, County Manager Hager. We don't need to be notified unless the fund changes. This is just the level we're at. If there are any questions about that, feel free to break in, but just kind of giving you an update. David, can we scroll on? Then we start talking about a few separate funds. If you look at Section 3, we talk about the Risk Management Fund and the Benefits Plan Fund. Just like the table up above showed you at the function level, these two funds don't talk about function levels. This gives the manager the flexibility to move money in these two funds between functional areas without letting you know. If the fund changes, you will know. That's just the difference in the setup here. This hasn't changed in 20 years, but just giving you a quick education. After that, it starts going through the tax rates for the county notified and the fire district tax rates, and the research production is the RTP service district. That's that whole page. Again, these are last year's numbers. They'll be updated. Last year, for the current year, remember the county property tax rate is 79.87 cents. We will be approving, hopefully you will be approving a 55.42 cent tax rate increase for 25-26. David, scroll on. Here's where we're going to start making some changes. We'll talk to you. These are some exceptions to the budget that the board, by passing this ordinance, gives the manager the right to do. It clarifies some of the things she, whomever the manager is, can carry out with notification to the board or without notification to the board. So let's go through Section 8. This is where it gets, you can read Section 8, A, B, C, D. Let me talk about the first one. Everything highlighted in yellow are some changes to the old ordinance. They're not major changes. Section 8A, letter A, really only adds the words between departments. The way it just clarifies the intent of this, which says the county manager can move money between departments in a function up to 15% cumulatively without reporting to the board. That gives the manager the flexibility to move money from her office to our office in the general government up to 15% of the total general government functional budget. It's technical, but it's you all giving her a little bit more room to maneuver. Does that make sense? Moving money from the sheriff to OES. Go ahead, Claudia.
Now, what I was going to say is we actually started looking at the ordinance last year with legal, finance, and myself in trying to see how can we streamline processes. How can we reduce the number of actions that don't necessarily, that don't compromise internal controls? Because we always want to make sure the board is informed. We have internal controls, but in looking at other jurisdictions, there were some places that they had modified that allowed for items to go through more quickly. So again, the other reason we're making sure with some of these is that we clarify intent. You know, some of us, with turnover, new people on board, we want to make sure that we link it to a statute if we need to, but if it's not clear, adding language to make sure that it is clear. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm just reading what's in Section 8, and I would say that I would like to have board discussion about this because I don't recall our board having an open discussion about these changes. So
You haven't, yeah.
I don't think we have we?
No,
Okay.
this is we're introducing it to you for a conversation today.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, so definitely Section 8, I would like the board
Right.
to discuss.
We're going to highlight the changes, then you can discuss them.
Okay.
So really the letter A was just a clarification of the intent of that item to begin with. All that was added was between the departments, because that's how it's always been understood. It just never said it. And as she said with turnover, just wanted to make sure the board understood. It's just a simple clarification of the language.
Because this is what's happening anyway.
Right.
This just expressly states that's what's happening.
What has been changed in section 8, letter B, is the amount. The county manager may transfer amounts up to $100,000 between functions of the same fund with a report to the board at the subsequent meeting, rather than it being a budget amendment that you have to approve. It's been $20,000 for 25 years. But the budget amounts, inflation makes everything we do a little bit more expensive. Does that make sense? $20,000 20 years ago is now this amount. That's all we're sort of doing, is updating the number amount, not the intent of what that statement has been saying forever.
And David, can you go to section 1 so we can help everyone understand what the functions amounts
table.
are?
There you
Table,
go.
yeah. So the function for general fund in that for general government is $181 million, okay? For public safety, if you see that first column, is $89 million. So basically what we're saying, if we need to do a transfer between general government to public safety at $100,000.
You can do up to $100,000 and report it to the board.
And report it to the
board. If
board.
it's $100,001, we have to come to you as a budget amendment, and you have to approve it.
Yeah.
We're trying to balance how much mundane technical work you all have to approve versus trusting the manager to do that mundane. But there is a level at which you should, and this is part of the discussion, want to be identified, and you weigh in with your approval, that numerical amount.
Yeah, and I was going to ask this question when we were discussing the budget a few minutes ago about like what was your authority in before of transferring money or executing contracts before it had to come to the board, and I knew it was like a small amount, so I'm glad we're having this discussion.
Section 8 explains the manager's authority for those types of decisions. So if we'll go back to section 8, we'll go to that particular one, and it's highlighted as well. The next one highlighted is D. That's an entirely new section, and this has not been seen by the board yet. It is a proposal that gives the manager the opportunity to designate someone else to sign in his or her absence when they're out. It just makes the transition to a deputy manager or ACM allowed to sign things smoothly. Claudia.
So if I am out for a day, I send a note stating I've delegated that responsibility. And so this formally adds it into the ordinance. It happens anyway, but again, in looking at other jurisdictions, we saw it formally there. So this is that note.
And then section 8E only adds the word "or a designee" as related to D for the next several things. So now we get into section E, and if you look at subsection 2, or II, this is where it's exactly what you brought up, Commissioner Burton. This changes the amount, executes leases. This gives the county manager or designee may enter into the following agreements within funds. Execute leases up to $100,000. It used to be $15,000 for normal and routine business within budget appropriations. This is county as a tenant. We don't do a whole lot of leasing in general, but again, it's an amount that's been $15,000 for 20 plus years. There's very little leasing that we would do that would be less than $15,000. Now it allows the manager to do it up to $100,000 without notifying you. Over $100,000 has to come to you all to be approved. Move to section 8, letter E, triple I. Enter into consultant professional maintenance or other service agreements. This is basically the signing of contracts. We're moving it up from a minimum $40,000. Anything over $40,000 currently has to go to you. You do see a lot of these in your agendas. Contract approvals of $40,500 because it's over 40. The manager's recommending changing that and moving it up to $100,000. It's been $40,000 for 20 plus years. Every contract we deal with of any significance is well over $40,000. So they all come to you, and as part of every agenda you approve on consent agenda, 4 or 5 contracts that are above $40,000. This isn't saying that we're taking away every contract. If it's above $100,000, it will continue to go to you all to see and approve, but it gives the manager and staff a little less administrative work they have to do because they don't have to come to you for approval of those.
And this is an efficiency measure. I know we've had where we really get challenged is during those emergency type activities, and in this environment as well, with the prices of different items going up faster than normal. It is also important to have it. I think there was an item recently that there were questions about why did it take so long to, I can't remember if it was the Center for Senior Life and HVAC repair. There was the bid process, and then it was a component with the timing of getting it on the board agenda. And the timing sometimes can present some challenge. We will always have a component where we can have a reporting back to the board of anything that's over a certain threshold, but this is done just for efficiency purposes.
We'll go to section 8, letter E, and Roman numeral 8, if you want to call it that. That is entirely new, and that is a technical one that the manager can explain.
Yeah, this particular one, the Department of Social Services and Public Health currently have the authority to execute contracts because statutorily that is delegated to them. So there are some contracts that go through the Public Health Board and the Department of Social Services Board. And I did present the various statutes that are referenced with these items. We can I'll talk about them more. I think you probably want to look at it and vet it amongst yourselves and send me questions, or we can talk about it further. And I'll move to the next one, which I'm proposing to bring back in July. This is looking at contracts with other agencies. This is one, again, trying to streamline how we do various contracts, and this impacts our construction area. And David, I sent you a slide. You may or may not have seen it. What we're trying to do, and as you know, we are soliciting we're soliciting right now an entity to help us with process improvements, reviews, et cetera, in finance, IS&T. One of the basic ones that we can do on our own is benchmarking. What does the state allow for approvals, and crosswalking those with what our practices are, because again, most of these have not changed in the past 25 years. I did it in an email. Yes, that's it, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And you could just go to, so it's just 2 quick slides. One, what we will be doing over the next several weeks before we come back to the board is crosswalking our guidelines with what the state guidelines are. And there are various thresholds when we have to do bids, when things are informal, when they're formal, et cetera. And we've heard quite frequently from some areas, especially in our construction and repair projects, the need to move differently so that we can get better pricing. And some of those thresholds are not necessarily on the board approval because it will be above 100,000, but what our policies are as it relates to thresholds for bids and then what is done internally. This is a little bit more involved, and so I just want to come back to the board later to discuss further. If you look at the other slide, David, you'll see what those thresholds are for procurement, construction, repair, and other areas, and we have lower guidelines, and so we've benchmarked what other jurisdictions have done, but need to have more time to discuss those with the board before we bring them forward. At all times, we're making sure that we are not increasing any of our risk factors, but we just need to make sure we're efficient in how we do our work. So we can leave this screen and go back to the other one.
So those are the changes to the managers, what sort of the budget ordinance gives the manager, allows him or her to do, or in this case. So Section 9 and Section 10 are where we sort of identify funding specifically for Durham Technical Community College in Section 9, and there's some laws we have to follow, and this hasn't changed in Section 10. The top part hasn't changed, but Section 10, letter A, is sort of important here. It's been in the budget ordinance for a while, but we have never really discussed it. The board hasn't asked Durham Public Schools to follow these things, at least come back to the board. Want to go over it with you. Let me read it. In addition, Durham Public Schools budget, this is the commissioners basically telling Durham Public Schools, their budget should reflect local appropriations by state purpose and function. The state, every school district in North Carolina has to give their budget to the state, and the state has its own sort of general accounting session. There's purpose and function, and some of you that have been on the BOA may know exactly what it looks like. There's the 5,000, which is instructional services, 6,000, which is called system-wide support services, to do that for state funding, and the state also says you have to translate local funding into these state codes. What we're proposing is to be added to the ordinance is we're asking DPS to take the county funding, $200 and whatever million we're giving them, and translate it into these codes, these state codes. They have to do that anyway. But we're asking it because we're add it to the ordinance, and go back to the letters, David, because the key part is the second part of that statement where it says, once adopted, that resolution, that table you're looking at, that will take local funding at that state codes, such resolution shall not be amended at the DPS level without prior approval of the Board of County Commissioners if the cumulative effect of such amendment would be to increase or decrease the amount of county appropriations allocated by purpose or function, by purpose. So what we're saying is if DPS wants to move 15% of their instructional services budget that's county funding to system-wide other 6,000, you all need to be notified and approve it. This is different than Commissioner Jacobs said intent. Well, you can write intent all day in a budget ordinance. Doesn't really mean anything other than it says your intent. This is telling the Board of Education if they move county dollars that they had for instructional services that for some reason they didn't need, $10 million of county money in instructional service, and they moved it to system-wide, one of those other codes, they would have to let you know and you would have to approve it. It gives you a little more oversight and communication with them.
And it's important to note this language has been here. We're streamlining it, but we're also adding the chart so that from an accountability perspective, you're clear what those categories are. In looking at other jurisdictions, this model was shown, and
yes.
So that's why we said, this would be great. I know our board desires more information or just communication of sort of where the dollars are flowing. So we didn't see this as a new burden, and we're streamlining it, but from a accountability perspective, just like for the county's component with the 15%, we're still keeping that language there with the transfer. So we're streamlining it and we're adding the chart so it's clarity as to what those categories are.
And the last thing we're adding is under where you see the annual local appropriation, including debt service, exceeds the required merger agreement rate of $1,960 per pupil. That is a number that was established when the city school district and the counties combined into one way back in 1992. And that's a holdout sort of statement. But we added to it, just for information in the budget ordinance, what the budgeted per pupil expense is for each year. So for 2025, it is $5,496. In fact, it will probably go up $50 or $100 per pupil because we're adding $2.57 million to schools. That's the recommended number. So that number will change, but that statement is just being added.
I had a quick question. I don't know if you know this, County Manager Hager. What is the state amount for, I know the $5,496 is the local per pupil expenditure, but do you know what the state amount is for local per pupil expenditure for DPS?
We can get that for you. We can pull it together.
Well, has the state budget been approved?
Or for the current year, we can get that information. I believe we shared it.
You just want
Yeah.
it for your knowledge. Yes,
Yeah.
we can get that information.
I believe, okay, yes, ma'am.
And those are highlighted in yellow are the changes that are being proposed to the budget ordinance that you can talk about now, that if you agree to them will be what you approve on June the 9th.
Okay.
And I will say that these, we've been living with this ordinance for over 30 years. So if there are pain points, we definitely can work to refine those areas in upcoming meetings. Again, the intent is to streamline operations, strengthen controls, and make sure that there's just that transparency.
Okay, I'm gonna come to you in just a second, Commissioner Jacobs. But I'll say, when we talk about the changes to the manager's approval levels, this is something the staff could correct me on this, but this is something I said almost immediately when I started. I was like, why are we saying $24,000 expenditures in our consent agreement? And then I learned about the limits that the county manager had. Just for reference, the superintendent of the schools has $100,000 as well. It's something like that in the city, for the city manager as well. So I was confused as to why the county manager has such low authority, spending authority. And I asked for this very quickly. How do we get that increased? Because we have over $1 billion budget. I don't necessarily think we need to see $50,000 transactions at this level. That's my opinion. As a board, we need to look at things strategically, not in the weeds. And I feel when we start to look at lease agreements that are $19,000 and this and that, I think that starts to the scope of a board member starts to creep when we're looking that deeply into transactions. So I appreciate you all bringing this. This has been a little while coming, and I'm excited about the possibility of us considering this, because I do think there needs to be some flexibility and agile natures to some of these transactions that could be done. Commissioner Jacobs?
Yeah, I guess I personally would have preferred this come to us before the budget adoption process, because these are significant changes in terms of the oversight of the board. And just, going back to North Carolina statute 153A, which is all of the responsibilities and authorities and power of county commissioners related to county government. We ultimately, the buck does stop with us. related to fiscal responsibility and accountability, we have the authority to delegate that to the county manager and to staff. So I'm concerned about just our role in terms of us being informed, and ultimately because we are the body that would be held accountable. If I'm just speaking in very general terms. I also would like to just have more benchmarking information. Obviously, these numbers like 20,000, 15,000 are low. There's no doubt about that. But I would like to know benchmarking data, like what does the city of Durham do, and then the counties that we do compare ourselves to. That would be helpful for me to have that type of context. And the other thing is looking at, where I'm always interested in just even being informed. So, for instance, is there a way, if I'm just saying, if we're going to make some of these changes that normally, a lot of these things, you just read them in on our consent agenda. But what I appreciate personally is that's how I kind of know what's happening and what's going on and how I feel like I'm informed. And is there a way to replicate that? Sure. And there is still a reporting mechanism to us so that we're aware.
Yes.
So those are just some of the thoughts that come to mind for me. So for instance, for B, again, I would like to know what is the benchmarking around that, to where that number came from. And then also is there a way that there's still, these are some of the transactions or decisions that have been made where it's just informative as a part of our agenda or whatever. I don't know, whatever makes sense. And then for D, again, is there, I just, because it says the people who will be informed are the clerk, the county attorney, blah, 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 but it doesn't say anything about the Board of County Commissioners being informed. And then for Section E on execute leases, again, I just feel like we should know what's going on. Same thing with number 4 under E. And then for number 8, I think similarly, because those departments are governed by the board, the DSS board and the Board of Public Health, where there's some way that they would be notified. So that's what I'm concerned about, those two issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for one, we definitely can share with the board, share as much information as the board desires. The county manager right now is responsible. The board does not, with the signature authority, that's the manager's role. That's not a board role. So who signs off on contracts? This formalizes it and states it in the ordinance. And that's the practice that we saw with other counties. But this is the same practice that we've always done. And so I think that's the part that we can come back and note what has been historical practice and what's best practice. From a continuity of service, our concern is you have folks who are new to the organization, there may be some gray areas. Let's take away all the gray and make sure we codify in the ordinance what our practices are, where we follow, because you're not going to have every general statute that you're following in the ordinance. We have other administrative documents that guide us in what we do. So for instance, for that, we can take it out because we're already doing it from the standpoint, if we look at D, the county manager does that. With the leases, for an example, it would be a very low probability that we would have a lease that's less than 100 grand. But definitely would report it to the board because we are, transparent. And then the number 5, the number Roman numeral 8, that one is a practice that we're doing because DSS, the board does their contracts that don't require a bid, that the public health department and the Department of Social Services, they're signing off on them and they're not coming to the board. So we're already doing that. We're just trying to make sure that although it's the law and they can do it, we also put it in the ordinance, and we're just trying to sync those up. But we definitely can talk further about it, the items. We usually talk about the ordinance towards the end of the process, but this is one of the times we've actually had some changes.
I just had a question around the Durham Public Schools with the Section 10A. I'm just wondering about the language. In addition, the Durham Public Schools budget should reflect local appropriations by purpose and function. I don't know, the word reflect seems, I didn't really know what that word means, or would it be better to use a word like designate, or I don't know, just the word reflect. It just kind of, but I just wasn't sure what that word means.
Well, we've used it for 30 years.
Oh,
And
we have.
so-
We've
yes.
always used that word.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The only word that is different
Okay.
is if you look at this statement, although it's in yellow, and although, we have, it's the underlined, we probably should have made that, and, yeah. Right. Put your mic on, please, Keith.
Thank you. We're not asking the board, DPS, to show their budget down to the line item level. That's not how you are identified in our budget. Purpose is instructional services, the way the state defines it, and function are the subsections under purpose: regular instructional services, special population services, and so on. Now, in the school budget in the state, there are many hundreds of object codes underneath regular instructional services. Not unlike how we say personnel services, personal cost for the county is a grouping of commitment items that include salary, and there's one for benefits, and there's one for 401k. Those are 401k payments. Those are all line items, but we don't ask you to look at all of that detail because there are literally thousands of them. So we added purpose and function, took out object because that's too much detail, and then did the same thing at the last sentence in that, where we took out function or object. We're basically letting the schools, giving them more room to let us know at a higher level. So they're not coming to you every meeting as they make changes. They make changes to their budget just like we do. If I'm understanding correctly, and some of the board members, former Board of Education members can help me, you have to do budget amendments where they move state dollars around, or they get state dollars and then they use county dollars and they move it around to fill holes where necessary, because there's a lot more freedom with the county dollars, the way we budget it, than there is the state dollars. This is allowing them that freedom up to a certain level. Then you all need to be notified, and it's the 15%. We budget at a current expense and capital outlay. We're just asking in A to also reflect that budget in a state-related way, which is that attachment that we showed you. That's why we use the word reflect, which has been in there, because we're not asking you to follow that, because we're budgeting at current expense funding of $200+ million, and current capital, which is going to be $5 million, what you approved. Remember, you took $1 million from it. But we're asking them to also reflect that same budget in the state form, and then notify us as they move that money around at a certain level, 15% in a state form. I'm trying to shorten this down and simplify it, but it may be creating more confusion.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to say, because, I taught in the buildings for 30 years, and so they can move money from, it was like number 1 was state, number 2 was local, number 3 was federal, and they would kind of move money between those levels to achieve what they want. And what I'm hearing you all say is if they do that with local money up to a certain amount, what, 15%, then they have to come to us to get approval.
For example, so you have money intent you want for bus drivers. That money is going to be allotted in their general ledger in one of those state functional areas. If for some reason they were to move that money and it was up to 15% and do something else than fund the bus drivers with it for whatever reasons, I'm not saying they're going to do this, then if it met that 15% threshold, you would all be notified, and you might say, wait a minute, that was not our intent, and you would have a lively discussion about that, and they might explain to you why. That's how that might work. If suddenly state money were to fall off a cliff and they said, oh, we were going to do supplements with it, you approving $1+ million of supplements, and they couldn't do it for supplements because they didn't get state money. These are pure hypotheticals here, and they move that money around to something else to keep the lights on, they might have to notify you at a certain level. Does that make sense? That's all you're asking them to do. If they're doing foundationally different things with the money that you're giving them, you're asking to be notified.
And it's important to note, this is not a new requirement. We're lifting the threshold, so it is at a higher level. I just don't want folks to get that part confused. Okay.
Valentine.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. So let me just say that I appreciate that, or at least it would seem to me that practices are now coming in line with the ordinance, so I can appreciate that. And Vice Chair, I do remember very early on having the discussions about this very subject, and so in an ideal world, Commissioner Valentine would have loved to have those conversations in real time. But we are where we are, and it would appear that we're in the correct time and place to address it. And so I hear my good friend, Commissioner Jacobs, has some concerns about liability, but I think these numbers reflect, where we are in the world and our responsibilities on this board. And so I'm okay with these threshold amounts in the name of efficiency and governance, quite frankly. And so I'm okay with what's presented here. I did have one concern, which has sort of been raised. The budget director, Mr. Lane, talked about how we can ask DPS to sort of explain what they've done with the money if they decide to do something above what they said or shift it into another line. Can we really do that? I guess this is a question for the attorney. Can we do that?
I'm sorry, what was it?
So this part of the ordinance allows us to essentially have DPS come back and report to us about a change in what our intent was, essentially, and come back to report to us. I mean, essentially, once we appropriate the money, they can essentially do whatever they want to do with that money. And so this seems to suggest that we can come back and have them explain to us what their change was. Like, can we do that legally?
I believe that they can.
Mike. Microphone.
Yes, I believe that we can. If we're just asking them to come back and report what the change is my understanding, right? Yeah, so I don't have any concerns about that.
Okay.
And this language and the ordinance that we showed you, or that table, is quite similar to what Mecklenburg County does with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District. And Wake County does the exact same thing. So you talk about benchmarking. We are not paving new ground here. And the ordinance says generally the county has the right to budget at the level, the way we're budgeting at current expense funding and current capital, or it can budget by purpose code that the state does. We don't budget by purpose code, but we're asking to see it both ways. We budget at current expense, which is section 10, and then in A is say we also want to see it this other way as well, because the state gives us the right to look at it both ways.
So towards the end of the school year, there are budget amendments almost every single meeting, every single one. But I see this as a pressure release, right? If they're moving large sums of money from one place to another, we probably already understand what the problems are already, because there would have to be some really big issues. Something major would have had to happen. And so I don't see this as an invasion of their authority to spend money how they choose. But if it is something like this, 15%, like a 15% move, that's a big problem that we probably should be aware of anyway.
So instructional services is going to be for DPS $100 million plus.
Yeah.
So it would take a $15 million move of county funding.
Right.
Before you would be acknowledged and let known. It's not small money we're talking about. Otherwise, you're saying you're doing your business, you got to move money around as you see fit to do the operations of DPS. But as stewards of county money, if it's big enough, or the cumulative effect is big enough, we'd like to know. That's effectively what's being asked here.
Yeah. And we are fortunate to have the former state budget director for the Department of Public Instruction. I know he just loves when I say that, because he and so we're always waiting on his legal hat and all his statewide hat, and he can also speak to just a couple of the questions.
Yeah, I can speak to a little bit about what's in the North Carolina general statutes when it comes to your oversight authority for the school boards around their budget. So we have two basic functions that we can do. One is a reporting authority, right? We can require them to share any information as to their finances that you would like to have. Now that can be, and you can decide whether that's something that where they present to you, which is they do periodically, or we can do more frequent, more detailed reporting. That's something that you guys have discretion, but effectively we have access to their books entirely. So we have that type of oversight authority. That's different than your question, Commissioner Valentine, as to what is it that we have the ability to approve. If we have something like this in our ordinance where we establish that they have to budget local funds. I mean, they have to use the uniform local school chart of accounts, which is the purpose, function, object structure. They have to do that under the Uniform Education Reporting System for the state. So they already have all of that done for all of their fund sources, state, federal, and local. Under the general statutes, we can limit their ability to move money without board approval down to the function level. What this does is basically says we are limiting their ability to move money at the purpose level, which, the function level, there's going to be a lot, to Commissioner Lee's point of view, there's going to be a lot of movement at the functional level. There will be a decent amount of movement at the purpose level, particularly because it flows from fund to purpose, and they're moving stuff back and forth from state, federal, and local pretty frequently, especially on the personnel side. But that's kind of, we do have the authority to require that we approve shifts at the purpose level. Okay. We can actually write that into the ordinance, but we have to enforce it, to basically have them come and to request through the agenda action form process, the same way we do with our budgets, if they want to make an amendment above the purpose level. But that's at the discretion of the board.
We are not doing that for every move. We're doing it at a cumulative. Ours says if it hits 15% or above, that's when you come and ask the board.
And I would say, just from knowledge, going below the purpose level, you would basically spend almost every meeting doing significant budget amendment reviews for Durham Public Schools. Because of the funding of positions that the General Assembly does, the budgets are in flux throughout the entire school year pretty constantly. It's a tremendous balancing effort that the DPS Finance Office does on a regular basis when it comes to their budget and their expenditures.
Thank you.
Part of the reason that I felt it was important that we put the table in, because I started this with my partner, Mr. Curtis, last year, and because of timing, we didn't bring forth some of these items. But we just felt in this climate that it would be helpful for the boards to understand what's happening so that we could have triggers earlier in knowing how we support them, because they are one of the largest areas in our budget. And so we need to understand what's happening if there are shifts so that we can be prepared accordingly. And so this, again, is a minor tweak. We're reducing the threshold that they've had from the past and adding the table. So just don't want folks to get that piece confused.
It may be worth you all bringing it a part of the quarterly meetings you have with the Board of Education and reviewing changes to their budget, particularly for local dollars. That's what you want to be aware of, and you could just say that as a part of every agenda, what's changed and where the key areas. You're just going to have to learn the uniform state code of accounts, that get used to that function area, the way they think of our budget. It's a little different than how we think of it.
And I just want to say that, yeah, that's what makes the school budget, I mean, it's not complicated, but people just don't understand because you got all these, codes, right? And it's just like, every item is coded. And I remember being a school media coordinator and I wanted to buy technology, but it was in my library books and I had to do a budget change to put it. Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Jacobs.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're very lucky to have you with us, John. Yes. Yes, we're very lucky. And you and your team are invaluable through the ARPA funding process. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I was going to ask what you said, Keith, about having the reporting that John mentioned as another tool that we have, or something that we're allowed to do, to have that aligned with our quarterly meetings. And I'm also wondering, you went away too quickly, John, is because what I am perceiving that the new CFO, who's fantastic for Durham Public Schools, I'm hearing a lot of conversation about, in our meetings with them, how they're really trying to align dollars with what is actually supported at the state level, what the allotments are at the state level, and getting away from some of the positions that are just completely locally funded, because unfortunately that is not necessarily sustainable for us anymore. So with that chart, that chart that you had up before about the purpose, how would that work with funding that is being used for things that aren't, like, would everything that we are providing local funding for be under all of those purposes anyway?
Well, everything that you're providing local funding for has to be budgeted by purpose fund object,
Okay.
right? So whether, I don't know enough about the details of their budget to know whether they'll have local line items in every purpose code that we have, or purpose area that we have and function area that we have listed up here. But they will be able to populate, once they adopt their budget, they would be able to populate a similar table that would be able to show you the various purpose areas within the chart of accounts and the function areas within the chart of accounts. It's just whether or not they use local funding for every single one of those. I haven't looked that closely at their budget in a long time, or not a long time, but in several years. So I can't remember off the top of my head if exactly how they distribute their local versus their state fund.
I have already sent an email to Jeremy Teeter, the CFO, and send him a copy of this, which he knows well, the accounting structure. and said, take the local dollars that we have, already managers recommended, and split it up the way you would for the state and let us see that. And we'll go back and write an email to them today and say, oh, by the way, $2.57 million more is going to be added to your budget. Commissioners will approve it on June the 9th. Now add that and make that total amount show up here. For example, the payment to charter schools will be $40+ million. That one where it says non-program charges, there'll be a $40 million number there. And then regular instructional services will be where there's 900+ positions the county supports, amongst other things. Be a lot of money, local funds in that one. And then, as John said, I can't tell you which one of those will be filled. I'm betting almost all of those broad areas will have some local funding in it that you will see.
Yeah, I mean, usually there's going to be local funding in pretty much every purpose code, except I think there's a few that might, like, there's a purpose code that can be used for indirect costs on federal grants and things. So, I mean, there's a few little things, or functional code, sorry. So there's like a few little things within the chart of accounts that may be missing on the local side, but I would imagine they'll probably have a decent distribution. I will say though, so like you might not be able to very clearly be like, okay, we gave you 2.5 million additional and it's going to be in just one of those lines, right? Like that could be the EC funding, for example, that you're intending to provide them could be split amongst 4, 5, 6, 7 potential functional lines, or it could all be in one, right? Like there's different ways for them to approach their budget, and the way that they code and charge different services. Like it's the chart of accounts is clean, but there is some subject matter overlap. And so there's only a certain level of detail you're going to be able to get no matter what from the budget within that's structured in using the uniform local school chart of accounts.
I appreciate that. And before I became a county commissioner, I was on the superintendent's budget advisory committee, and I know how complicated the school funding is. I think that doing this and having this at our quarterly meetings will be beneficial to all of us and also to the public. What we heard last year when we were facing an unprecedented crisis, we heard from the community that they wanted the county to be more involved with helping support financial accountability and transparency. And so I think this will help everyone achieve those goals. Thank you.
All right.
Great, thank you so much. And I believe that covers the items that we had, the major items with the ordinance. Again, let us know if there are additional questions. We will follow up with some documentation, and we have time. So this is 30 years in the making. And so we're grateful. Our intent is to be more efficient, transparent, and accountable, which is always in the forefront. And we heard the board members shifting now from this topic to others loud and clear about key performance indicators, program evaluation, and in my message I spoke about that. Those are areas that are of high importance, and next year we'll be in a different position in telling our story. So, and that is a commitment for me. Well, I thank you all for your patience, and it's hard to believe we're at this stage, and almost 30 years in the making from the standpoint, having been a budget guru, policy person, etc. This being my first budget, I am grateful to have a commitment from the board over the years to be supportive in whatever capacity I've been in. I'm especially grateful in how you have trusted us in this process, and will walk alongside us as we try to move forward with a season of unknowns. I want to especially thank the budget team for their hard work and always going above what's required. Thank you so much to all of you. The deputy and assistant county managers, all the other department heads and staff, because it is a shared role, and the community members that have shared their concerns and have worked with us as well, as we've tried to partner to bring forth our best effort, knowing that we can't fill all the gaps. So again, thank you.
And I just want to say, I'm just so happy we got through our first budget together. Thank you, thank you, thank you, yes.
Well, actually, I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege and just say, Chair Alam, I hope that you're resting and recovering, and we hope to see you back in the chamber here soon. And again, I'll just say thank you to everyone who played a pivotal role in getting us to this point. And so we're looking forward to the next step.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm excited as well, Michelle, that we made it through a budget. So,
Yeah, so Monday night, we will have the adoption. We'll also celebrate the young lady who did the cover. So we're excited about that and honoring her. And so if there are questions, please let us know. We will get those responses to you. Thank you.
okay. All right. All hearts and minds settled. We are adjourned.